Okay, so what is re-entry shock? So if you've been overseas for a long time, you get to hear, or even if you've only been overseas for a week or two, or encountering a different culture, like homeless culture, urban culture, you might be here. But no matter where you are likely to go up when you think about going home, because you've missed home, you've missed food from home, you've missed your friends, you've missed how easy it is to be there. So you feel excited right before you leave. There might be a little sadness of leaving the local culture, leaving the little orphans in South Africa, or whatever you've grown to really appreciate in the culture. Of course, if you've been there longer term, then that sadness would be a greater factor. But generally, there's some fun here with the idea of going home. And then, when you get home, you will go boom. And you will crash. This is re-entry shock. Okay, now what exactly is re-entry shock? In the next slide, we have a list of things that students react to that causes re-entry shock. So students will, on an I-term, hopefully a student will change. They'll be exposed to something that will change them in their heart. They'll realize that homeless people are real people, that they'll make friends with a homeless person, or they'll fall in love with a little South African orphan, and somehow their heart will be changed. And then they come home, and there's dissonance. Something here that didn't affect them before, they'll all of a sudden be aware of. Affluence is the biggest thing, especially when students go overseas or when they deal with people in situations of poverty. So we come home and we see our friends and family going to Starbucks and spending $5, $20 if you're buying for one, depending if you're buying for one or your whole family, on coffee drinks, and you think about the homeless guy that you met last week on your I-term who had nothing, or you think about the orphan in Africa who has nothing, and all of a sudden you think this is such a waste of resources. So money seems like such a waste here. Also, the values of American culture seem very superficial. It seems like everything is about movies and entertainment and gossip, whereas you've just been exposed through I-term to issues of poverty and injustice and the things that break God's heart. Now when you come back to America, everything seems shallow. Additionally, sometimes on mission trips, young people are given responsibilities that are really important responsibilities. If one of your I-termers has the responsibility of planning the sports camp for the kids, the inner city kids in LA for the whole week, and they get the value from that the kids really appreciate it and they grow through it, and they feel like they've been in a position of important responsibility throughout your I-term. They come back here and they have no responsibility, and maybe their youth group at church doesn't give them responsibility. Maybe it's a situation where the youth minister does everything and the kids don't do anything, and so that can cause dissonance. They also might look at their church, and if it's not a church that gives to missions or does a lot of social outreach, they might feel dissonance in that too, because their heart's been broken for the things that break God's heart, and they think that their church should also have a heart for those things. The biggest one is that they feel like no one really wants to listen to their stories. A lot of people will listen only for 30 seconds or a minute, and then they move on. They want to talk about the latest movie or the latest things going on around town or around school, but they don't want to hear very much more about the I-termer's experience. So they really need people to listen to them, and if people don't listen to them, there's a big sense of dissonance. They might even feel like they can't share it. Well, the way they share it doesn't really engage people. And finally, they become aware of their own habits that before they didn't even think about, but now those things are disturbing to them. So maybe they also used to go to Starbucks every day and spend all that money on luxury items, but now, because of their experience on iTerm, they realize that that is something that maybe is not the wisest use of their money. And then suddenly that dissonance even occurs within themselves or within their new self and their previous self. So the three reactions. Some students might just assimilate. Assimilators, this is on the next slide. Assimilators just slide easily back into home culture. They seem to have adjusted well on the outside, or readjusted well, but actually they haven't integrated any of their experiences that they had back in the other culture. Alienators are on the opposite end of the spectrum. They completely reject home culture because of all this dissonance, and they become very angry, pessimistic, critical of the people around them. They can't seem to think that, okay, in this context, this is okay. Some things are okay in a certain context, or some things are okay for now because people don't realize or don't know any different. They can't sort of see the nuance. If they have friends who don't have a heart for orphans, they can't see, okay, instead of just rejecting them, pray for them and have a heart or have an experience with orphans so that they can know God's heart. So the nuance is lost on them. It's kind of black and white, and they just reject everyone who has not had their experience. They might feel stuck and not able to move forward with their incorporating their experiences into their life. And finally, if they're in that place of dissonance and anger for long enough, they will probably just succumb to the home culture and sort of forget what they experienced. So there's no real long-term change. Just like the irony is that just like with the assimilators, the alienators don't really have a long-term change in their life. Finally, we have the integrators. Now these are people who do have a long-term change in their life. And they're able to identify the things that have happened, the ways that they've changed, and enter into a process of integrating those changes into their life around them. If they see things where there's dissonance, for instance with their church, if their church does not help the poor and the widows and the needy, rather than rejecting it, they enter into a process of helping the church to know more about those issues and inviting the church into a stance of addressing those issues and loving those people. So they integrate their experience into their new lives. And there's a real long-term change. And one of the key differences with integrators is that they expect the dissonance. They are not surprised when they come home that this dissonance is there. They have been trained to anticipate it. So the next slide, toward a growthful reentry. These are the three strategies for helping your students as they come back off of iTerm and as they deal with reentry shock. First, anticipate. So this is talking to them about that dissonance before they return. So on your last day of your iTerm, on the plane ride or the bus ride back, having a conversation with the group, even if it's only for 20 minutes, where you say, okay, let's talk about what's going to feel different when you get home. Because of what you've seen here, how will you look at things differently? And what kind of things will feel strange or weird or wrong to you because of your experience? So anticipating it really helps things. Secondly, balance. And this is very simple, just helping them to have a balanced diet, balanced sleep, balanced exercise. This physical balance contributes to emotional balance as they try to integrate their experiences back into their normal life. And finally, debrief. This is key. They need to find at least one person who will listen to the super long story of their experience. And hopefully it'll be a parent, but don't assume that a parent will be able to do this. You should coach your parents to do this. But whether it's a parent or somebody else, there needs to be one person who will ask them questions like the ones on this slide, about what did they do, what was difficult, what was sad, what did they learn about themselves, what did they learn about the church, about God, about the world, and how does that affect their life as they move forward, okay? I would even encourage you to have your students write down the name of the person they want to do this with them, and to send an email to that person, like on the last day of their I-term, a quick email saying, would you please debrief me when I get home? And that means give me an hour of your time. Let's go to lunch or go to coffee. Give me an hour of your time and ask me as many questions as you can think of about my experience, what I've learned, what I've seen, and how it's changed me. So, finally, a lot of students, I mentioned, can't express their story well, or they don't know how to express their story. So a really great thing to do is to get them to practice that. And usually 3 versions are needed. The first version is a short version, and I mean really short, just 30 seconds, one quick snapshot of something really powerful that happened to them. Most students, when they come back from a trip like this, you ask, how was their trip? And they say, it was great, it was awesome, it was amazing. But that doesn't really give me a picture of it. Instead, teach them to think about one moment and to paint that picture. Maybe it was one orphan that they met in South Africa, and this little child just clung to them all day, every day, and when they left, the little child asked to go with them. I don't know. Something that's a vivid picture of a person and experience that they had, and something that they can tell in 30 seconds to really engage their listener. Most people will only listen for 30 seconds, but some people, if your 30 seconds is interesting enough, they'll want the median version of the story, which includes a few additional stories, 2 additional stories, that would give you maybe 3 minutes of sharing about your experience on I-term. And finally, the longer version, which gives you a little more space. You don't have to be quite as concise, but you should still be careful that everything you share, try to really prioritize the things that are powerful, that changed your view of the world, that helps you grow more in your relationship with God, or how you see the world through God's eyes. So, the 2 assignments for the end of this lesson. Assignment 3C is for you to do what I just explained. I want you to think about a recent I-term, and I want you to write your short, medium, and long stories so that you can use these as models for your students for future I-terms. If you have it down yourself, an example, that'll really help your students to be able to do it for themselves. And by having their stories ready to go, they're going to be so much better at integrating their experience, sharing their experience, and just really feeling like their experience really mattered, because other people will listen to them and really validate that. So the assignment 3C is for you to write your story, short, medium, and long, of any past I-term trip that you've been on. If you don't have an I-term trip you could write about, you could think of some sort of a short-term mission trip that you've been on in the past. Just so it's a good model for your students. And assignment 3D, finally, is to read the re-entry guide for parents. This document is an example of a letter that a woman named Lisa Chin wrote for the parents of her youth group students. She was taking them on a mission trip, and she wrote them this letter in advance, gave it to the parents, and it's basically preparing the parents to help their students with re-entry. Preparing the parents to hopefully be that one person who does the long term, or the long debrief session, or even if they're not that person, to be more supportive in the process of their child coming back. And I think she gives a really good model that we can use for iTerm. So read her model, and then I want you to write your own version of the same letter, a letter that you would write to parents of kids going on your iTerm trip that would help coach them to help their kids through this re-entry shock, to go back up. And to be integrators who really use their experience to improve their own life and also improve the people in the world around them.